I'm Garry Jacobs. Let me ask you a question. What do all these things have in common? Language, family, agriculture, markets, cities, money, law, the printing press, democracy, the Industrial Revolution, railways, telephones, credit cards, the personal computer, the Olympics, the United Nations, the Internet, eBay, Google, Facebook, Amazon, iPad. What do they all have in common? They are all examples of the phenomenal, miraculous power of organization. 2,000 years ago, the Greek philosopher Archimedes made a famous statement. He said, "Give me a lever that is long enough and a fulcrum to place it on. I can lift the world." That's the power of organization. It's the power that's driven the evolution of humanity from the Stone Age to the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I'm the lead instructor for the Caucasus University course on theory of organization. I have more than 40 years' experience studying the principles and powers of organization in business organizations, in nation states, in global society, and in the lives of individuals. My conclusion is that organization is the single greatest invention of all time. Not money, not computer, not internet, not even the wheel. It's organization. It's the thing that makes all of the others possible. Where does this remarkable power come from? That's the question we will explore in this 7-week MBA course on theory of organization. If you're like most MBA students, you're seeking practical knowledge and skills that can apply in your own work, in your career, in your business, and in other fields. The founder of modern management science, Peter Drucker, once said, "There's nothing as practical as a good theory." This course combines the study of theoretical principles with their practical application in business and in other fields. We'll explore the secrets that enabled a railway station master named Richard Sears to build the largest retailer in the world by 1920 and maintain that position for 60 years. We'll study the process and dynamics by which a young industrial engineer named Henry Ford converted a garage-level cottage industry of car making into the first massive mass production industry in the world, producing 1 million cars a year. We'll study the life and work of Bill Marriott and his wife, who opened up a fast food drive-in restaurant in Washington, D.C. in 1927, and built it up into the largest hotel and food service company in the world. And of course, 2 kids named Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who started in a garage and built the most valuable company in the history of the world. And others, many others, 100 others, Uber and Airbnb, and so many other examples of the power of organization. This is not a traditional course. We're not going to just focus on the types of organizational structure and systems and bureaucracy and rules and regulations and standards. But we'll look at all of that. We're going to study organization as a central unifying principle that links together everything to make it work. Links the company with the wider society of which it's a baby, a child, a part. Links the people within the organization and their suppliers, their bankers, their customers to what's going on inside. Links it all together in a seamless whole, which we call a living organization. The central theme of this course is the process of human accomplishment. How we accomplish as human beings and what's the role of organization in that accomplishment, and how we can consciously apply that process at the level of our own personal lives, in companies, at the national and international level, to grow and achieve phenomenal results. As study material for this course, we're going to use excerpts from 2 books that I wrote, published in the US, based on my research and consulting work with hundreds of companies in the US, Europe, and Asia. We'll explore all the major components of a business: market, finance, technology, people, and organization itself, and see how they're held together and how each of them can be converted into an engine for high performance, high profitability, rapid growth. We're going to also look at some entertaining Hollywood movies and see what we can learn from the life circumstances in which our lives are presented, and see the role of organization there. We'll have a lot of interactive discussion and assignments to help you apply these principles in your very own work, in the companies you're working with now or those you've worked with in the past. If you're a student who's eager to think, learn, ask questions, challenge conventional assumptions, and apply what you learn in your own life, join me and let's together explore the mysteries and miraculous power of organization. And before closing, let me quickly introduce the rest of my team. S.S. Srijit, who's the founder-president of the Global Institute of Integral Management Studies in Cochin, India, the largest business school on logistics and supply chain management in the whole country. And Vani Senthil, Janani Ramanathan, who work closely with me in all my research and consulting work. Hope you'll join us for this course. Look forward to meeting you and working with you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Garry Jacobs. Let me ask you a question. I think once is enough. Thank you. Just share my screen. Okay. Well, hello again. I'd like to welcome you all to this course. We have a combination of students from Caucasus University, beautiful university in Tbilisi, and from GIMS, the Global Institute of Integral Management Studies in Cochin. We're here to do as much as we can to help you on a subject which I hope you will find more fascinating than it is rigorous or demanding. The more you get into the spirit of it, the more I hope you will enjoy it. I'm more interested in your getting at the essence of things than memorizing terms and concepts for an exam. Because if you really get the central message of this course, this will provide you a knowledge that's useful in anything you do, whether it's in business or in other fields, and help you do it better because of that. A few of the mechanics. One of the things we will take seriously is attendance at the course, because without that it's very difficult to learn. Participation in the course, because that's the only way we can get to know you and hear your responses. This is a short, compressed time we have and a lot of material, and we're going to experiment with different ways of interacting so that you have more ways to communicate with us, with the team, and we have more ways to communicate with you. Today, we were originally planning for 3 hours, and then we learned at the last minute it's only 2. So we're going to be a little tight here, but we're going to try to build in time in all of the sessions as we go through for us to get to know each other better and interact more. We'll go into breakout rooms starting with the next week's course. I hope that my pronunciation will be intelligible to you. If there's anything you don't understand, I don't mean just language-wise, but but in terms of concept, please say so. There are 2 ways to do that. If we're in the middle of something, you can raise your hand, and one of my colleagues will see that. I will not see it, but they'll tell me. If I don't mind also, if you want to call out your name, so that I hear you. I would stop at least where there's an opportunity or when there's an opportunity to stop. In addition to our verbal communication, we've got the chat room that's connected with Zoom, and we also have WhatsApp. If you're wanting an answer or a response right during the session, let's use the chat. But in between sessions, in between our meetings, if you have questions you want to ask or areas where you feel you need clarification, I suggest you use the WhatsApp for that, because we'll monitor it throughout the week and try to give you answers as far as we can. Or when we start the next session, we'll start with the questions that have been raised as a result of the previous one. So this is a bit of a learning experience for us. I use a lot of online conferencing and all, but interaction with 30 people in a limited time on Zoom is still a challenge, and so we'll learn as we go along. Any questions before we get started? I would appreciate if people turn off their mobile phone for the course of the meeting, as you would do in the classroom. But unlike being at Caucasus University in Tbilisi, you're allowed to eat in the classroom as long as you share with the rest of us.
Nice.
No questions. Okay, let's get started. And we're going to start today with some basic concepts. And I think you'll see we're going to build up from the basic concepts to the application in business and society. And I'm going to try to bring this to the point where you really understand something of the secret of how some companies grow, the way the companies I mentioned in the video, companies I studied firsthand and reported in the first of the books, The Vital Difference. Sears, which became the largest retailer in the world for 70 years, 60 years. Marriott, which is perhaps the largest hotel chain in the world today. And Ford, which was the first really mega automotive company in the world that really paved the way for mass production in the automotive industry. And we'll talk about many others as we go on. If any of you have not finished the student survey, I would appreciate you do that. And most of you have not done it yet, so that we can get to know you better and study the results before the next class. That will help me look for examples and ways of communicating and focus on things that are familiar to you or of interest to you. It's not a test. It's just to get to know you. And we will share that so you can also get to know each other. And we'll try to provide some time within the class hours, but I would also appreciate if you would think about participating together in non-class hours, and we can arrange a platform for that if you need one. So you get to discuss some of these ideas among yourselves. I can even ask one of my team members to participate in those groups and answer questions, just so you can exchange ideas, even doubts and questions. What was that guy talking about, and what does it mean? I don't care what you asked. Okay, any questions at all about the course or what we're going to do? No?
Sorry, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, it's okay.
2-3 seconds.
You hear me now? Is there any problem with the audio, Janani?
No, just 2 seconds, that was all.
I see. Just a blip in the internet. Huh? Okay. Okay, well, if that happens again, Anna, please tell me immediately. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Let's get started. Power of organization. We've divided each of the lectures into 4 units, so that you can digest it, and we can refer back to it in sections. So I'm starting with a riddle. I don't think a very difficult one. You can see it. What is this? You cannot see it or touch it. We use it all the time. You need it to defend our borders. You need it to make products and deliver services. You cannot think or speak without it. You cannot buy or sell without it. You need it to cook. You need it to learn. You need it to make money. You need it to succeed in any field of activity. It's the most powerful thing ever discovered by human beings. Anyone?
Internet.
Pardon me?
Internet.
Internet? Well, I don't know about you. You must be pretty advanced. I don't use internet to cook.
Maybe brain.
Brain? Huh? Okay, that's pretty.
Knowledge.
Knowledge. Okay. Anybody else?
Time.
Organization.
So organization.
Organization. Thank you for that. Okay. Well, brain is pretty good, and time is certainly essential. And we all want money, though we may not all have it when we start. But what I'm after is organization. My theme is, and we can argue about it, but it's the most powerful thing human beings have ever discovered, and I want to discuss today why we say that. So what is organization? Anybody? What is organization?
It's a group of people. May I?
Yes, please.
It's a group of people, it's a system made to achieve the common goals. Very shortly, a short definition for it.
Anyone else?
I can add some issue. This group of people which want to gain the common goal has knowledge, and they can operate organization with their knowledge.
Okay, good. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So organization is a group of people used to create for achieving a common goal or a particular goal within a short or long period of time by utilizing their resources and their knowledge.
Thank you, Mithun. Okay, well, the three of you pretty well came to a consensus. You're pretty much talking about the same thing with little variations and additions. But I want to talk about organization at a more fundamental level than that. Everything you said is true, but the word organization has more than one meaning. And what I want to get to is the fundamental principle of what we mean by organization, of which this is a subset. So, what is this?
Management.
What do you see?
Management.
Management. How did you get that? Was that Lakshmi?
Yes.
Lakshmi, how did you get that?
It's easy. Management. It's, I don't know.
You just organized letters.
It's just organized. Sorted out like
The letter. So, what you just said, Sophia, is that this word is an organization.
Yes.
This word doesn't have any people in it, doesn't even have time in it, doesn't even have goals in it, which were in our earlier definitions. It has letters that have been organized. So a word is an organization. And I'm not trying to be fancy about this, but we want to get to really where the power of organization comes from. What is this?
It's the definition of the organization.
But it also needs the organization, so it
Also needs real. Anybody want to try?
real sentence.
Anybody want to try?
Organization.
Organization is arrangement of activities, processes, ideas.
Organization is
Maybe it's better to write down.
encouragement.
I'm not gonna, it's not supposed to be a brain teaser, but it's supposed, so look, we saw that a bunch of letters by themselves don't do much for us unless we arrange them properly. When we arrange them, we get a word, what we call a word, which has a meaning because it's organized. And this is the same thing for a sentence. A sentence is a group of letters organized as words, and words organized with punctuation also, to say something. And this is what that one says. You would have all figured it out in some way if you'd had a little more time.
Is this type of big organization?
This is, look at organization is look and see if you can think of an organization.
More complexity.
That doesn't fit within this definition. Organization is the orderly arrangement of space, time, symbols, ideas, information, objects, people, processes, activities, and events. It's a pretty exhaustive, inclusive definition. The organizations that you were talking about were organizations of people. And of course, those people are conducting activities, and they're using information, and they're handling objects, certainly, and ideas or goals. Goals are some type of in space and time. But the principle of organization, which is what we're talking about now, is broader. And I started this way to say was something very simple, that language itself is an organization. We're using it all the time. Language is a series of sounds, and yet those series of sounds have no inherent meaning. Unless we share that meaning, unless the word or the sound means the same thing to you and the same thing to me, it doesn't have value as an organization. So language is not just a series of sounds. It's a series of sounds that we have given a particular sequence, importance to, significance to. It's also sounds that are formed into words and that have shared meaning. And an orderly sequence of words and sentences that convey facts, ideas, actions, events, emotions, and other things. So, language is an organization. Language I'm calling a social organization because it only exists between people. If you and I, if each of us has our own language, it doesn't work very much. I can only speak to you and you can only speak to one another if we have a shared language where each sound, each word, each sequence means the same thing to all of us. And what is the power we create with that? We create, language is the first power of human beings working together to form society. Without language, there could be, without language, whether sign language or verbal language or written language, there could be no society. There can be no communication. There can be no coordination. We can't work together. We can't live together. We can't have family together. So I'm stressing something which I think you'll agree is pretty obvious when we look at it this way. The whole of human civilization over the last 100 or 200,000 years is made possible because we are able to organize sounds, give them a symbolic meaning, share that meaning with one another, and organize them into more complex units we call words or sentences or ideas or songs that give us a shared society. So I started with this because I want to emphasize we are all using the power of organization all the time. And everything that humanity has achieved since the first invention of language or the first club is an invention based on organization that's giving us more and more power. And what we want to talk about in this course is the sophisticated levels of the power of organization that keep multiplying over and over again. And it's that power, if we understand it, we'll understand how the achievements of the past have taken place, and we'll also understand from where we are how greater achievements are possible in the future. So as I said, though we're talking theoretically, our goal is something very practical. How can we use this power more effectively in our own lives? And one of the characteristics of organization, and it's a characteristic of language, is it transcends space and time. That's obvious to us today, right now, because we're using language over some other types of organization to communicate from each other thousands of miles away. And since these lectures will be videoed and made available, they can be used sometime in future by you or other people for communication. And we do this all the time. So I'd like you to come away with something of a mystery of what this is all about. Where do we get this power? What is that power? What's behind it? And how can we learn more about it? That's what this course is about. Anybody know what this is?
It looks like rain.
That's the old map.
That's the old map. Any idea what it's the map of?
Libya.
You'd have to look pretty hard to find Georgia there.
Yeah, this is,
I found Armenia.
Mesopotamia or?
this I would say this is the first map that we had when the continents were not divided by then. This is Pangaea, I would call. I mean, if I'm not mistaken.
And notice, my own country, United States, America is not even. We're not
Yeah.
even have to worry if you can't find Georgia very clearly. It's a map of this. And what,
Can you hear?
Yes.
Could you hear me? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it's the Pangaea that we called before the continents were divided, right?
This is actually what we thought the world was. This was.
So it's the first version of the map. The first ever version of the map of the world.
It may not be the first version, Zizzy, but it's an old one.
The oldest. Okay.
And what?
It's a useless one.
It's useless? Well, it was pretty useful.
Yeah.
It was useful in its time. It's useless now.
No.
Now, because we know a lot more. So look at this again. This is what we think of it. Of course, you know this is just a projection that doesn't really look like this. It's all distorted. But this is the way we depict our understanding of the world today, so we know where we're going and we can go anywhere to anywhere else. And this is what they thought they knew at that time. Mm-hmm. Well, this map, as we call it, is an organization. It's an organization of knowledge. This happens to be an organization with a good deal of ignorance thrown into the knowledge, but it was an organization that had power. Long before we knew that the earth was really more like this, people were using this map to navigate from one place to another, to go from one country to another or one continent to another, not realizing that they weren't all even connected with each other. So it had a power. It was maps like this, and not much better than this perhaps, that enabled the first European navigators to finally come and discover India and China and get back again. And you know, the maps at that time, the Portuguese had the best maps. They knew how to get to Indonesia or Philippines or Japan and everything. They were a top secret, because if you had a map, you had power over everybody else in the world. You knew where the prices were. You knew where the silk was. You knew where the markets were. You knew where the gold was. The jewels were. So it had power. But compared to what we have today, that power was very, very limited. And So knowledge is one element of organization, and the more knowledge that's built into the organization, the more power and effectiveness it has. Okay, this one I'm not going to ask you to recognize. This is one photo of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., which has about 16 million books in it, maybe more now, because that figure's a little old. But the only reason I'm showing you is that we take for granted you go into a library and you look for books and you go by category and you go alphabetically, you go by category. We have the Dewey Decimal System in the US. I don't know what you're using for your libraries in Tbilisi. But imagine having 16 million books in a building and trying to find the book you're looking for if it's not organized.
Right.
And the question that's so obvious to us now, because somebody else thought of it for us, is, well, it's very simple. You organize the fiction in one area and the nonfiction in another area, and you divide the nonfiction by subject, and you divide the fiction by country, and then you order it alphabetically by the last name of the authors. Very obvious to us. Any fool should have known that, but it took them centuries and centuries. The Library of Alexandria, they didn't have that kind of organization. They had, I think at one time, 100,000 scrolls, because that was the books of, at the time of the original Library of Alexandria. Imagine 100,000 scrolls, and you have to look through them to find out what you're looking for. Until they're, or what's the power of that? When somebody who knows the secret can simply go down the block or go down the hall and pick out exactly what they're looking for. This is the power of organization. How about this? I think everybody knows what that is, and it even says what it is.
Mendeleev.
We take all of this for granted, but imagine how many centuries it took humanity to conceive of the different elements, the physical elements on Earth, to figure out their relationship with each other, to see them by group, to organize them by atomic weight and atomic number and their other categories, and how much knowledge is built into this. It's not just a list of elements. It tells us the properties of different groups of elements. We're able to predict what will happen when you combine them because we know their molecular structure, their atomic structure, rather, and so forth. So again, where would we be? Where would our chemistry be if it wasn't founded on this much knowledge organized in a simple way that we get for free, effortlessly, when we study chemistry, even if it's boring for many people when they're doing it. We take for granted centuries of discovery. And to discover one new element and where it fits and what its categories, its characteristics are, is a standing miracle. And we organize it in such a way that centuries of knowledge can be passed on to youth, to the next generation, and referred to as a tool to be much more productive than people could be before. Okay, just for fun, how many ways we arrange this classroom? Okay, let's say we've got 30 of you. How many ways could it be arranged?
Arranged in groups, or what does it mean?
Arranged in orders or groups, like one can be from the youngest to the oldest, or in groups like our favorite colors.
Thousands
in many ways.
It can be done in many ways. Huh? It can
Right.
be.
We have just finished our statistics course, so we can calculate it.
If you can calculate that, your statistics
Right.
good. I think when you really think about it, you'll find even statistics won't help you too much there.
Yeah.
Let's, for fun, we can organize it from, well, we can, of course, in the traditional old way, the first thing we would do is organize it by gender and have all the women on one side and the men on the other, except if we go back far enough, there may not have been any women in the classroom at all. And in future, we may not allow the men in the classroom either, so don't worry about that. We could organize it by age. That's what we do in schools, of course. We have classes by age. We can organize it by by subject matter, by interest, by occupation, by height, by nationality, by how many languages you speak, and I'll be disappointing. I'll be in the one group. I'll be in the one language group where you're all much more qualified than I am, and so forth. So your statistics will only help you after you've figured out the different ways you want to organize it. And it's as many as we can do it by hair color or eye color, by the dress that we're wearing, color of the dress, or the type, by your favorite food.
By political preferences.
By political preferences. Now we're heating up the discussion. Getting interesting. Exactly. By hobbies, by sports, by favorite singers or musicians or anything else. In fact, we could organize the class in countless, infinite number of ways. Where we were born, what our occupation is, or anything else. And this is one of the characteristics of organization, that there is an unlimited number of ways in which you can organize almost anything, like the letters that I was showing you or the words on a page. And according to the way you organize it, it serves a different purpose. For different purposes, we organize things in a different way. We can organize ourselves alphabetically, and of course we can do that by first name or last name if we want, and so forth and so on. So I'm trying to indicate how vast and ever-present, omniscient, or omnipresent this principle of organization is. Okay. Now a question is, we've talked about a few organizations, and we're going to talk about many others. How many different types of organization can you identify? Easy?
How many different types of organizations?
Types of organizations.
Can we call money as an organization, sir?
We can and we will. And we'll discuss it a little later, too. But why do you call money an organization? How does it fit the definition?
A lot of financial enterprises, nations, currencies, everything is involved and they are running in a system. So we can call it as an organization, right?
It is a system that we use that. I mean, if you're on a desert island, one of the characteristics of organization, this is a social organization, it only has value when you're with other people.
Correct. Yeah.
If you're on a deserted island like, what's his name was in that movie about FedEx, I forget the name now.
Castaway.
Castaway. Your money's not going to be very useful to you. It doesn't have the value it has in society. Maybe you can burn it in a fire for keep you warm, or sleep on it as a pillow or a bed. But money is a social organization because, like words, just like words, it has meaning, the same meaning to both of us. If the word doesn't mean the same thing, it's not very useful. If I hand you a paper and you say, I don't want paper, I want food. No, I'm giving you something very valuable. You can get any food with it. If you don't accept that and you don't know anybody who accepts it, it doesn't have any power. It has power when we both recognize the same standard. So money is a very complex organization, by the way, and one we'll touch on later on in the course. Well, anyone else?
Like in case of the language, Garry, right?
What's that, Zizi?
Like in case of the language that you mentioned in the beginning of the class. Yeah.
Exactly. Language is a networking tool. It enables us to interact. Money is a networking tool. Language enables us to communicate with each other. Money enables us to exchange with one another.
Right.
The internet's also a networking tool, a very sophisticated one that enables us to exchange and transact all over space and time, all over the world at instantaneous rate. They're all organizations. So what I'm interested here is if we take the different types of organization, if a library is an organization, it's a physical arrangement of books according to a plan. So we can say it's a physical organization. Like a toolbox has different places, or a tool rack has different places for different tools, or the kitchen cabinets where you keep the cans in some place and the utensils in another and the dishes in another. That's an organization. It's a physical organization.
Also virtual organization.
What's that, Anna?
Also virtual organization.
Virtual organization. Okay, and your idea of a virtual, which is the virtual organization?
Like electric books, arrangement of electrical books.
Okay, what about language? Is that a virtual organization too?
Sorry, I can't understand.
What about language? Is that a virtual organization too?
Also, yeah.
The social networking medias.
What's that, Mitun?
Social networking medias is a good example for virtual organization.
I couldn't quite hear it properly.
So social networking medias like Facebook, WhatsApp.
Social networking is an organization, right?
It's a good example for a social organization, virtual organization.
Yes, Sophie, you had something?
For example, we can say types like social, political organization, like business organizations.
Okay, so we got what I'd like to emphasize for simplicity is three basic types of organization. There's a physical organization of things, mainly objects. We've got a parking lot where we park cars. We've got a pantry where we store food. We've got a warehouse where we store our inventory, and so many different, a library and so forth. And then we've got social organizations where people, in which we use for interaction between people. We've got businesses, we've got educational institutions. We're having a social interaction now. It's a form of organization.
Languages as well.
and language we use for that purpose. And we've got government, we've got laws. All of these things help us to relate to one another. And then we've got something we could call mental organizations that are organizations of ideas or concepts, like the periodic table or the map. The map is not a thing. It's a representation in ideas or thought of the relationship between physical places. The periodic table doesn't really exist as a physical thing, but it helps us to organize our ideas and understanding of the chemistry of the elements. So I find it very useful, and I'm stressing this only so as we go forward, we realize organization has different levels. Some things are organized physically, some things are organized socially between people, some things are organized mentally at the level of our ideas. Planning, example, is an organization of ideas. A dictionary is an organization of, or an encyclopedia is an organization of ideas and information and knowledge. Hopefully a course also is an organization of ideas, even though it's delivered socially, virtually, or physically as well.
Sorry, can we say that emotions are also mental organization?
Is this Anna?
Yes.
Anna, it's a wonderful question. I feel like dropping everything to answer your question because emotions are a very nebulous thing, hard to get our hands around. But we have emotions for different people. We have emotions about different things. We have different emotions at different times. And that there is an organization of that. It has to do with the organization of our personality. It has to, it's part of a bigger organization, which we call personality. And I
think it's the hardest one.
What's that, Anna?
I think it's hardest one to organize emotions.
I agree with you. It's a pretty hard one it's a hard one to even get your hands around, or our minds around, rather. It is. And that's why I studied psychology, and I really wanted to understand the organization of human emotions and the organization of the human personality. And frankly, we're a long way off before we understand what we are, the organization of ourselves as human beings. And emotions are a very critical part of it. So you touched one of my favorite subjects, but we probably won't get to the mystery of the personality during this course. We'll come to it, but I don't promise you that we'll uncover the mystery of it. We'll touch on it a little, and that's a subject for another course, which I'd love to do with you in the future. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to, because we've got a tight schedule, I'd like to go to the second unit. So the first unit was power of organization, and I think you get the idea. We're going to go into it much more, but the fact that organization has power, whether it's a physical organization, a social organization, or a mental organization, for communicating, for learning, for storing information, for interacting effectively with people, or just for handling merchandise. And when we tell the story of how Sears became the largest retailer in the world, one of the key problems that they had to solve 110 years ago was, how do you organize product in a warehouse so that you can find it quickly and ship it efficiently, something we take for granted today, and companies like Amazon have done it on a global scale, and that's what Srijit's organization studies, logistics and supply chain management. But there was no logistics and supply chain management science when Sears started out. That's a physical organization. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 powers of organization. And these are interacting, interdependent powers. But the purpose of dividing it into 4 is to show that there are different types of power that organizations have. And all the power is not the same. And that power is not only of different types, but have different impact. And we want to talk in this course about all the 4 powers of organization and where they come from, so that in whatever work you do, you can think of ways to improve and release and generate more power at all these 4 levels. And the 4 levels I'm talking about are efficiency. That's the thing we commonly associate with organization. If you have organization, you can have greater efficiency. Multiplication, the capacity to multiply things, to produce things, to make more of them. This is interesting. Organizations have the capacity for self-multiplication also. They can reproduce themselves. And creativity. We usually think of organizations like systems, that they're the way that they fix things in a rigid way, like a bureaucracy. But organizations, if they're properly designed, also have a capacity for innovation and creativity. They can create themselves, they can recreate themselves, they can create new things. And we're going to talk about different examples of these. So I want you to see it as a hierarchy of different powers. And we're interested in all of them. First, the power of organization for efficiency. Janani, help me out here. What's this?
Okay. This is the 16th century Indian king Akbar, Akbar the Great, as he was called. There are many remarkable stories about him, achievements to his credit. The story of his birth and how that information was conveyed to his father, that is a very remarkable story in itself. This father who was engaged in battle 100 miles away from the palace. King Humayun, the father, and his wife was expecting their first child. And the king, who ruled most of India, Pakistan, modern-day Afghanistan, he was anxious to hear the news of the child's birth as quickly as possible. Some of his ministers suggested fast messengers, horses, a relay of horses, but all of this would have taken a day or 2 because of the hot weather, the rough terrain. One minister said, "Oh, the news can be transmitted in a few minutes. How is that even possible? This is 500 years ago." He said, construct tall towers, makeshift towers, every few miles all along the route from the palace to the army camp. Station a man on every tower and give him a drum, agree on a code, something like, 1 drum beat for a boy, 2 beats for a girl. And as soon as the child is born, let the man in the first tower start sounding the agreed code on his drum. The man in the second tower will pick up the sound and he will repeat this code. This code is then passed on to the third tower and so on till the news comes to the tower that is near the army camp, right next to it. And so this way, news travels almost at the speed of sound, 5 centuries before cell phones, email, even telegram. So this is basically just an example of a system that makes use of what is already available in society, the towers, how to construct these towers, men, drums, a pre-arranged code, and achieves what seemed impossible before. 150 years ago, it was considered remarkable achievement to travel around the world in 80 days. Around the world in 80 days, this was a famous novel that was written about it because it was such a remarkable achievement then. Today, we can make the same trip in less than a day. But what makes this possible is not just that we have planes today or faster trains and ships. The technology, the scientific development, all of these, they are just one factor. What is equally important is the organization that holds all these together. For example, if there is no railway timetable, what is the use of all the entire railway network and all the trains in the country? For air travel, there is a perfect arrangement between the various airline companies, between the airlines and the airports. That is what makes air travel possible. The connecting flights have to be synchronized. The luggage that we check in has to go to the same destination as we are going. And if it's international travel, there has to be an arrangement, understanding between governments. So it is these links that actually make travel possible today, travel around the world in less than a day. So in these two stories, actually, one of the ideas that actually come out is technology is one element. We think technology moves the world. Everything is possible because of that. But it is one element. For example, if we all have a computer or a cell phone, just because we have it, we will not be able to be in this course today. There is a uniform protocol that lets us all connect over the World Wide Web using this Zoom platform. But it's not just the technology. There have been weeks and months of correspondence between the university, the faculty members, information being sent out to the students. So it is all of this that makes it possible. So using all the components that are there, this arrangement or organization that we just saw in the first unit, the way it is efficiently linked and organized makes possible what would otherwise be inconceivable.
Thank you, Janani. It strikes me when you were talking about Akbar, actually what he uses is some sticks that are put together in an organization to create a tower, and a drum, which is a hollowed bowl or something with a skin over it. That's another type of device. And without the people with the code, they're useless. And I, by the way, I wondered in your story, what happens if she had twins? If they don't have a code for the twins, they'll be in real trouble at the last minute to communicate and try to tell what actually happened. So it's a simple organization, but it was brilliant at the time, and so brilliant that we remember it even today. Okay, 1971, I believe, somewhere around then, a man named Fred Smith, he was a former Marine pilot in the United States, he decided he wanted to create what we call now the overnight delivery business. A map of the United States you recognize, I'm sure. The distance from coast to coast, from New York to Los Angeles, is about 2,500 miles. And the flying time is about 6 hours in a jet. But if you were trying to send a package from New York to Los Angeles at this time, which I had tried to do, you'll know that it takes a minimum of 3 days and an average of 1 week. Now, Fred Smith, being a pilot, said, look, the flying time is only 5 or 6 hours. Why should it take 3 days or 1 week for packages in the United States to take so long? I want to create a business where if you give the package in New York before 5 o'clock in the evening, the next morning at 10 o'clock, it can be delivered in Los Angeles. He said, after all, the flying time's only 5 or 6 hours. So the question is, how do you do it? And that's where I want a little help from you. The common sense way would be, okay, let's start this, Fred, and just you're going to deliver packages from New York to, let's say, San Francisco in California and Dallas, Texas. You're going to want a plane that starts in New York at after 5 o'clock every night, flies to Los Angeles or San Francisco. You're going to want another plane that flies from New York to Dallas. And you're going to also be able to want to send packages back again. So you'll have a plane starting in Dallas and going to New York, and another one starting in Dallas and going to Los Angeles, to San Francisco, and a plane going from San Francisco to Dallas. So in order to cover 3 cities, you'll need 6 airplanes. I hope it makes sense. Now, Fred Smith said, what's the idea of running a company for overnight delivery where it only goes to 3 cities? We've got at least 100 cities, important cities in the US that we would want to cover, not all of them huge. So I want more than that. So he figures out, okay, let's say I want to go to 4 cities. Just 1 more city I want to add 1 more city to the list. How many planes do I need? And he calculates and he finds out that if you want to have planes going back and forth between all these cities, you actually need 12 planes. You need 12 planes just to add 1 more city. And then he gets curious and he says, well, what happens if I want to add more? And when he goes to go 5 cities, he finds out he needs 20 planes. And then he does the calculation and he finds out that if he wants to do 100 cities back and forth, he needs almost 10,000 planes. 10,000 planes is a huge amount of money. And just to give you an idea today, I looked it up. The total number of airplanes that are used in the world today for carrying freight back and forth from one place to another is only 2,500. In the whole world, there are only 2,500 aircraft that are used for carrying freight. And he's got to have 10,000 planes just to do it in the United States. And now FedEx is a global power. So what do?
You arrange it so that you need less airplanes.
Yeah. How do you do that?
It's hard.
State after state, maybe, like. Yeah.
What, that's easy?
Arranged by the states, by the cities, like not to all of them at the same time, but like the one after another. You make the schedule.
Okay. I'm tempted to give it as a homework assignment, but I'm not going to do it because we have something more interesting for homework assignment. And I'm going to give you a quick answer to the problem. It probably took them longer to figure it out than we did. You do this. You decide at after 5 o'clock every night, which really means about 10 o'clock, planes, you have 100 cities, and you have 1 plane in each city. And at about 10 o'clock at night, all of these planes fly to one place in the middle. It was Memphis, Tennessee, because of the weather was really good there. There was very little weather disturbances for flights. And you take all the packages off the plane and you put them in a big warehouse. I've been there and seen it. It's really fascinating. And you sort out the packages from where they have come from to where you want them to go. And then the same 100 planes carry those packages back to the destination from where they came. So with 100 planes, you can accomplish the same thing that he was going to accomplish, or somebody might have thought of accomplishing, with 10,000 planes, because he thought of a different way of organizing it. So this is an example of the power of efficiency, and quite an impressive power. And that made FedEx the largest air transport company in the world. We met them in 1989, and by 2000, they were not only the largest in the US, but they were the largest in the world, because they were using the same planes everybody else did, but they were the first ones to figure out the most effective way to organize the business. So that's how powerful and important organization is. What about this, Janani?
This is a classic example of the power of organization. When the US President John Kennedy, he announced in 1961 that the US will send a man to the moon and bring him back safely to Earth within the end of the decade, the entire space experience that the US had was a 15-minute pre-orbital flight. The technology to get off the Earth to the moon and back did not exist. But the president had made a public announcement and NASA had to implement it. So they collaborated with 400,000 people in 20,000 organizations. Universities and research institutions provided the research and the knowledge. Manufacturing companies provided the parts. Government organizations had to provide the approvals and the finance. And they made it. And with a year to spare, one of the architects of this mission said, overcoming gravity was easier. Handling the paperwork was a greater challenge. So it was handling the paperwork and coordinating with the various groups was as important as the technology, the science that made it possible to land a man on the moon and to bring him back safely.
So it's not just coordinating a bunch of airplanes. It was coordinating thousands of organizations, each one having to do a particular role to design the food that could be eaten in outer space, or the spacesuit, or the landing vehicle, or the radar, or the hundreds of other technical devices. So from the simplest thing of running a kitchen or a restaurant up to international space travel, interstellar space travel, organization is a critical factor. So this is our second module of the course this is the second point of the power of organization to multiply results for efficiency, sorry. Now we're going to go to the second of those powers. Normally in a 3-hour course, we will break in the middle for some time. I hope it's all right with you. Since we're just 2 hours today, we will go through and use the time. And so we're going to the power of organization for multiplication. They call it Unit 3. This you may or may not recognize, but you all know it. This is the Gutenberg printing press, the first printing press in Europe in 1452. In 30 years, there were 100 presses like this around Europe, that would printed about 5 million books. In the next century, there were about 20 million different books that were being printed, and in the following century, about 200 million. It's a very simple device. Actually, the printing press was based on the oil press that was used for pressing olive oil. Same principle, only thing is they introduced the letters, the molded metal letters that could be assembled into the types. That one innovation enabled them. Before that, books were written by hand. It took a year sometimes to make a copy of the Bible. The books were so valuable that in the few libraries that existed in Europe, they would chain the books to the shelf so nobody could take them because it was a lifetime dedicated to copying one book. Today we take them for granted and they're a throwaway value because we've learned how to multiply them so well. So we think of this as a technology, but it's really an organization. It's an organization of the way of a process and an organization of materials in such a way to give a result that they would not otherwise do. This is a picture of the original moving assembly line at Ford Motors, built in about 1908. Up until that time, the total number of automobiles made in the United States in a year was about 10,000. Total by all the companies, because each automobile was made one at a time. Like an old carriage would have been made, you start in a room and you build it up from the base all the way up till it's finished, and then you start again. And the idea that you move the car along an assembly line and you add things to it each stage along the line, so there are cars being made at each stage as it goes, was something new in the world at that time. And in a few years, about 20 years, Henry Ford was producing 1 million cars a year in his own factory. From 10,000 cars in the whole of the United States, one company was producing 1 million cars a year because he figured out how to organize it. There was no real technology involved that they didn't have before. What they had is a system, which we know very well. We call it the moving assembly line. And this is a simple part of it. Actually, there were many moving assembly lines going in different directions, all of them feeding in to the main assembly line. So, power of organization to multiply results from 10,000 to 1 million. It's another shot of it. This is maybe the batteries that are being made. Okay, what's this about? Srijit, can you help me?
If I'm muting the video, that's fine because I have a little bit of internet connection actually problem.
Okay, we hear you.
Yeah. Good afternoon to you all. Let us have a quick look onto the world history timeline. This is purely based on scientific evidences. Science tells the formation of universe was some 13.8 billion years ago, and formation of planet Earth was around 4.6 billion years, and life on Earth some 3 million years back. First human species got evolved as per the scientific reporting was before some 1.5 billion years, and the first Homo sapiens, which resembled us, got evolved 200,000 years back. The first organized activity of humans were agriculture, which had enabled us to live in a place near river banks, which later on helped us in building civilization, culture, customs, family, towns, etc. Agriculture was invented just 10,000 years back. Can you just think for a moment what humans were doing before they invented agriculture? How was they feeding themselves? Let us address this particular issue. We might have been consuming only fruits and nuts or later on meat through hunting and all. Can you change the slides? Okay, we might have been consuming only fruits and nuts or later on meat through hunting and all. Let us assume that this process took around 190,000 years. Humans as a new species were observing things around, color of the fruits, whether they were edible or not. Some fruits and vegetable comes in certain conditions. We were observing rain, sun, climate, soil conditions, whatnot. We tested it, and it took some years for us to systematically program these methods of agriculture. It was not an organized and conscious activity, but more of a subconscious urge for a vital satisfaction to satisfy our hunger. Can I go to the next slide? So I would now like to take your attention to India of 2020. India is now a self-sufficient state for food and agricultural production. It's in the top of the list in case of cereal production like wheat and rice, and also in fruits, vegetable, marine products, meat products, edible oil and pulses. But the situation was very different 70 years back. We were a very poor country where major percentage of our population were starving and struggling for their day-to-day food. We had two wars, one with Pakistan and one with China, and in that decade of 1960s, we faced two severe droughts. These droughts, along with two wars, were enough for a country like India to collapse because we were in our early stages of independence. We had no facilities for warehousing or structured agro markets, no scientifically driven logistics and supply chain management, poor in technology and in transportation those days. On the other hand, introduction of vaccines and life-saving drugs, population started exploding like anything. Due to severe droughts and no guarantee for sales of surplus production, farmers of India in 1960s, which was 80% of the total population, refused to produce more. India had reached a stage where we had food only for 2 weeks, an acute food shortage. World Health Organization had intimated that 1 million people in India are going to die. Government of India and the Food and Agriculture Minister then did one of the most organized activity of human history. He established Food Corporation of India, imported hybrid variety of seeds, built warehouses to stock surplus production. Government had given guaranteed pricing for surplus products to all farmers. Food then can be taken to food deficit areas. With the help of us, all ships, with the help of all of us and all the countries and United States, all ships carrying food items from deep seas were redirected to India. Ports of neighboring countries, even Pakistan, were used to download items. Demonstration in farms, fertilizer production units were set up, all in no time. People and farmers reacted to it positively, although initial hiccups were there. Against all the protests, Government of India has shown an effective organizational power, which made the nation come out as self-sufficient state in food production. In just 5 years, actually, and became an exporter of food grains in 10 years' time. Now see, there are two real life events here. One about the evolution of agriculture, which I told it took some 10,000 years. And the other is an exponential growth of India in the agriculture sector. We can note that, the agriculture revolution, which took 10,000 years for humans to develop this thing, which was almost an unorganized and subconscious activity. Same humankind in some part of the world doubled or tripled its agriculture production in 10 years. Later on, it has been called Green Revolution.
Wonderful story, Srijit. Thank you. I love this idea that what humanity accomplished in 10,000 years, it doubled in 10 years by organization. Of course, there was technology of the hybrid seed involved, but without the organization, it could have never taken off. And in other places, it didn't. But the other thing to mention is that from India, the Green Revolution spread to many other countries, Philippines, Indonesia, and eventually to Africa more slowly. So it was really, we're talking about the capacity to multiply results. What the world had figured out how to do in 10,000 years, it figured out how to double in 10 years. That's what we mean by multiplication. That's the power of organization. Thank you. What else multiplies very quickly? Now we're talking about food grains. We talked about making cars. We've talked about moving packages. What else multiplies very quickly? Books.
Virus.
Huh?
Virus, for example.
Wires?
Coronavirus.
Yes. Our
Multiplying.
it's true.
Very, very, very much uppermost in our minds. Virus. And actually, virus comes into another category. You're right. It multiplies very quickly. It actually comes in the next category. It multiplies itself.
Yeah.
With the Green Revolution, it was human beings that multiplied the food. It was human beings that produced more cars. It was human beings that printed books and multiplied the number of books. But with the virus, it's something else. It's the thing itself multiplying. And that's what we mean by self-multiplication. So what else multiplies itself?
So money.
Huh?
Money.
Money, very good, interesting. Very
human population.
Population, there we go. Here's the human population. Now that, thank you for who mentioned that?
Easy.
Easy, perfect. Just right where we are. This is a graph of the human population, very interesting, 10,000 years ago. We were about 10 million people on the planet, according to estimates, 10,000 years ago. That's about the time that agriculture was invented. By the time of Christ, we were 100 million people. Did I say 10,000? 10 million people, we went to 100 million people. In just 10 centuries, am I doing that right? No, in 10,000 years, we went from 10 million to 100 million. Then from 0 AD to 1800 AD, we went from 100 million to 1 billion. And then in the last 200 years, we went from 1 billion to about 7.5 billion. So we are not only multiplying ourselves, and it is, you're right, very right, self-multiplication, but it's getting faster and faster. Compared to the virus, we're nothing at all. We're really slow. The COVID-19 moves like lightning compared to us. But it's the same process. What do we have in common? We're both living things. We're both living things. Living things have the capacity for self-multiplication. Cars don't multiply themselves. Books don't multiply themselves. And many other things don't. But living things have that capacity. We're quite slow in an evolutionary sense. The virus is like lightning speed. And of course, we know a lot of other things multiply. Websites multiply. Here's a chart just from the year 2000 from, what is it? We don't have can't even read the graph here, but from a few million websites, we're now up to more than 1 billion, just in less than, this was 2015. So it's much more than that now. Here we see computers being multiplied, not self-multiplying yet. We multiply the computers, we multiply the smartphones, and we see that the speed of multiplication is growing more and more. We say it's technology, but the computers don't multiply themselves, the smartphones don't. What's really increasing the speed is our organization of it. The scale, the sophistication, the coordination of our organization. And we're interested in knowing the power. What gives us the power to do it more and more quickly, more and more efficiently than before? And that's the theme of the course. And then, of course, the smartphones, just to see what's happened in the last 15 years. This is only 10 years, but how it came out of nowhere. And now, even in a country like India, still having quite low average income, you find the smartphone in every village. There are more than a billion smartphones in India, almost one for every person, though some people have two, of course. but it's gone, every family has a smartphone now. It's connected the whole country together. Okay, and then this was interesting to us because we work with the non-governmental organizations with the United Nations, and it was interesting to see that in how much the number of non-governmental organizations has grown from only about 15,000, actually this figure is not correct now, it's more than 30,000. Since the end of the Cold War, the number of non-governmental organizations in the world has more than doubled. Okay, and then these are organizations we're all familiar with. FedEx, we've already talked about. The capacity to move things at great speed, and now they do it all over the world. Amazon Marketplace, I think some of you will be, or many of you must be familiar with it. I'm not just talking about the Amazon website. That's interesting in itself. It's the largest online retailer in the world. But what's more interesting for us as an organization is what they call the marketplace. Because the marketplace enables anybody to set up a business and sell anything to other people anywhere in the world. Amazon does the marketing. We go to Amazon and we ask for a product, and we don't just find out the product that Amazon sells, we find out the product that thousands or hundreds of thousands of small businesses are selling, and we can buy those products not only all over India, which is a big market for Amazon, but in all over the world. So it's an organization that enables, imagine you as an entrepreneur wanting to set up a business, you have a technology or you have a skill, maybe you're a talented painter or a weaver or have famous recipes or writing books or anything. Imagine the problem we have of reaching out to our market once we have a product. And now suddenly we can just link ourselves in a marketplace where we can reach every customer that Amazon reaches in every country around the world. They've created an organization that we can tie into. We all know Google and we all use Google. And as a search engine, the reason it's so popular is over the years, you know, when Google was invented, there were about 35 search engines being used in the United States. And I wondered, in my ignorance, I wondered, why do we need another one? It turned out that Google's was better than the others, and pretty soon it became the most popular because you got better results. But the real key to Google's growth was not its search engine. The real key was they linked the search engine to advertising. They said, they know when you're searching for something, whether it's dresses or cars or books or anything else, they know something about us. And so they started offering ads that were linked to what we're searching for. And from nothing, they became the largest advertising company in the world. They're not even producing anything. They're simply helping us find what we want and using our view to sell ad space. And they've made this one of the 5 most valuable companies in the history of the world simply because they figured out how to link 2 things together, the search engine and the advertising, which looks very obvious to us today, but wasn't at all obvious when they did it about 1999. So this is a creative organization, an organization that makes possible new things that we haven't done before. And we're going to talk a lot about creative organizations as we go on. And what multiplies the fastest of everything? Well, I think you've already answered that question. We'll give the credit to the COVID-19 virus, though there may be something faster than that, but it's pretty impressive by our means. And now we go to the last unit, and that is, not only do organizations have the power to multiply, but they have the power for self-multiplication. And that's what the COVID is doing very fast. Anybody know what this is?
tree?
That's a pretty...
No?
But it's a particular type of tree. Actually, this is a California specialty.
The height of the tree?
This is... Yeah, it's a tall tree for sure. It's not only a tall tree, it's a very old tree. This is the California Redwood. It's a very famous breed of tree. It's one of the oldest things on Earth. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, this is the oldest species on Earth of any living thing. Some of them live up to a few thousand years. And every year, a tree like this generates about 10 million seeds. Now, a little mathematics. You live for 2,000 years and you generate 10 million seeds a year. Your potential for multiplication is pretty impressive. Of course, not 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, maybe only 1 in 1,000,000 of these seeds survives as another tree. But they've survived for 2,000 years or more through this process. This is the process of self-multiplication. This process for the tree is very slow, but it lasts for a long time. They've been around for a long time. And we know at the other end, you've got the virus, which probably only lives for a matter of hours before it dies, but it grows really quickly. So it's another kind of self-multiplication. Srijit talked about agriculture and how agriculture grew very slowly, and now in modern times, by organizing it, we learned how to do it very quickly. But that's not the end of the story for agriculture, because agriculture is not only grown through its efficiency, it is grown through its creativity. Because the whole of our civilization today is based on agriculture, on the creativity that made agriculture possible. First of all, as somebody mentioned, it made the growth of population possible. Growth, the food production grows. And the reason we have such a large population in the world today is we have a capacity to produce so much food that it supports a much larger population. And since India's Green Revolution, the population is more than doubled, but much better fed today than the food production has probably increased 4 times since then. But agriculture does something more. It not makes possible the growth of population, makes possible the settlement. Instead of traveling around, going to the forests to get food, gather food, or hunt for it, it makes it possible for us to sit in one area, to found villages, and stay in one place. So it makes possible the beginning of villages and settled areas. It makes possible land ownership. As long as you have to run wherever the food is, land ownership doesn't have any meaning. So property comes in. It makes it possible for us to produce surplus food. Why is that important? Why is it important that we can produce more than we need to consume? After all, as long as I get what I need to eat, who cares about the surplus?
To sell it.
What's that?
For business purposes.
Yes, because we can trade the surplus. We can trade the surplus to somebody who has something else that we want. It also means we can get things that we can't produce. I may be just producing rice or wheat, but if I have surplus, I can trade it for people for any number of things which I cannot produce, not only what I can't grow, but what I can't catch or make myself. But not only that, something even more fundamental than that. It makes it possible for some of us don't have to produce food. We don't all have to be out hunting all the time or gathering all the time or even growing all the time. If some of us can produce more food than we need, a lot of the rest of us can be doing other things. We can be teaching, we can be doing science, we can be running a military, we can be running governments, we can be entertaining and making movies and songs and books and so many other things. And that's the basis of civilization. unless we produce more food than we need to consume, we can't have towns and cities because we don't grow food in our towns and cities, except in little plots on the roof or something like that. So the whole growth of human civilization has been made possible because agriculture is creative. It created markets. It created the basis for cities and towns. It enabled us to civilize. So not only we have farmers, and we have craftsmen, and we have manufacturers, and we have traders, but we can have judges and teachers and writers and dancers and poets and kings and police and libraries and so many other things. Everything we have is made possible because our organization of agriculture has become creative. And then we get our whole civilization out of that. We have property, we have laws, we have government, we have education, and we even have culture and the arts and the music and people who can spend all their time on these things. So this thing is really not a very dull subject. This is really a very powerful subject that gives us a secret to how human civilization has evolved and grown over time. Janani.
During the Indian independence struggle in the last century, Mahatma Gandhi, he advocated civil disobedience. One of the things that he told all the countrymen and women is, let us all make salt. That's a rather strange way to fight for freedom. You know, we've been ruled by the colonial rulers for 200 years, and he says, let's just go and make salt. The background to this is the British had a monopoly on salt production and had even imposed a tax on salt, one of the most essential items for people. The country with a 7,500 kilometer coastline was not allowed to make salt. So Gandhi simply said, let's all just walk to the coast and make salt. The idea was so simple, but it inspired the entire country. It's a small act, but when 400 million people, which was the population then, when 400 million do it or support it, its power, even though the act is small, its power gets tremendously magnified. And in 17 years, India got its independence. Now, this was something that happened within one country. But then in 13 years, 45 other countries in Asia and Africa had got their independence. The same idea, the methods that were used, the aspirations, it continued to spread, and its impact was seen in the American civil rights movement in the 1960s, in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa in the 1990s. So this is one example of how even ideas just seem to self-multiply and spread. Real ideas have that power.
Great. So look, this may sound a little abstract, but you're going to see when we talk about business that this is what's happening all the time. The organization multiplies itself, is imitated and extended, helps the society grow. The society imitates and extends. What started as FedEx in the United States, I know in 10 years, there were 100 courier companies delivering overnight in India. And that was true all over the world. It multiplies, it replicates itself. Starting with salt, what's the big idea of making salt? Because the British had a rule that you can't make salt without a permit and you have to pay tax on it. And Gandhi wanted, without violence, he wanted to demonstrate to the British, to England, that the Indians could disobey them. So they did something it was impossible to 100,000 British to stop 400 million Indians from making salt. It was a way to prove that the British are really helpless. And from that time on, the British were thinking, how do we get out of India while we still can before it's too late? And then it said to once one big country, which was called the jewel in the crown of the empire, has taken independence, everybody wanted independence. This is how life grows. This is how society multiplies. This is a creative process. And that's what business is. That's what enterprise is too. And that's what we're going to be looking at. Okay, Srijit mentioned money, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but because money is so important in business, it's worth realizing what Srijit asked earlier or said earlier. Money itself is organization, and it's an evolving organization. And it's not only makes for efficiency, which we know. It's a lot easier to go to the marketplace with some currency in your pocket or a credit card and not carrying a bag of wheat on your shoulder and trying to trade it to somebody for something else. It makes for efficiency. You can send your money by electronically anywhere in the world. You can't, even with our latest technology, send a bag of wheat virtually instantly anywhere in the world. So it makes for efficiency. But money has also been evolving. The original money, actually cows were used as money. Corn was used for money in ancient Egypt. Tobacco leaves were used for money in the United States. Not a very convenient thing to carry around in your pocket, big bags of corn and big leaves of tobacco. Then symbolic things became money, shells and beads and iron pieces and special wooden items that were called tallies in England. And then we took precious metals. I mean, gold is lovely as jewelry and everything, but if we can't use it, if it doesn't have another value, it's not very convenient to be carrying around a lot of gold in your pockets. First of all, a good object for theft. Secondly, it's very heavy, not very convenient. So we went from precious metals to metals that weren't very valuable, and then we went to bills of exchange, paper, letters of credit. In the U.S., that we had 6,000 different types of banknotes. I mean, they were really not the paper notes that we're talking about, but they weren't made by the U.S. government. Every bank was printing its own. Imagine chaos when you have 6,000 different types of banknotes from different banks, some of them very big and reliable, some of them may be already out of business by the time. So we finally came to national currencies, and then we came to credit cards, and now we're to blockchain, cryptocurrencies and everything. So the organization of money, which is much, much more complex and sophisticated than I'm speaking of, we study it in one of our research organizations, but it is a very sophisticated, powerful organization that runs the world today. But it is an organization. It's not a thing. Money is not a thing. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not. It's not a thing. I may have a $1,000, €1,000 note. I actually had some 500 euro note when I was living in Europe for some time. And I went around to shops trying to use it to buy things, and nobody would accept it. I said, well, I'm in the Eurozone. How do we know it's real? We don't know whether it's real or not. It's a real note. It's not good enough. You better go to a bank and tell us whether it's really real. So the currency note doesn't have any value unless I believe it's real, or everybody believes it's real. Just like the sound of my voice and the words I speak don't have value unless you know the meaning of the word, and it has the same meaning for you. It's an organization. It's an arrangement. Okay, we're getting towards the end now. So now, I said, not only things multiply, not only can they self-multiply, they even multiply exponentially. And this is, there's a possibility for exponential growth, and we have their attention. Ani, can you help?
Yes, one simple thing would be rumors multiply exponentially. Positively, we can say information and ideas grow exponentially. And everyone would notice in social media, the posts on certain content or how your friends list grows. And when you share more, your friends list also grows exponentially. I'd like to share some information about a company called Navtech. In 2007, Navtech was the leading technological company that collected traffic data. They installed traffic sensors on pillars along the roads like CCTV camera to capture the speed of cars. Navtech was so valuable at that time that Nokia bought it for $8 billion. But the growth of that $8 billion.
Nokia bought it for $8 billion.
Yes, because it was thought to be a high-end technology, and it was, they thought that they figured out the way to collect traffic information, and it was very crucial for people. But the growth of that company, Navtech, was heavily dependent on setting up the road sensors. It was time consuming because they were physical sensors, and it was a costly affair to install and upgrade hardware devices. During the same time, there was a small startup company called Waze. They used GPS sensors in smartphones to retrieve traffic information. When iPhone was launched in 2007, almost everyone owned a smartphone. The Waze app pulled in data from customers and gave out useful traffic information back to them. So with very little investment, Waze grew in a short span of time, covering large areas. Its customer base and profit grew exponentially. With no infrastructure, no assets, no hardware, and less than 100 employees, Waze leapfrogged the market leader. The contrast between Waze and Navtech shows that organization overcomes the limits of time and space.
So you mean, whereas this NASDAQ, what is it?
Navtech
had to build sensors physically on all the roads in all the countries, Waze simply used our mobile phones to get information from us about the traffic speed and everything in different locations. So it's a different concept. It's a different organization. It's a different technology, of course, but it was a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking. And so what happened to Waze now?
Waze is bought by Google for $1 billion, and it still operates as a separate entity. It is one of the top most beloved apps. Navtech is no more. It is bought by Nokia. Nokia made such poor decisions. They didn't recognize the smartphone industry at all. Now Nokia has been overtaken by every other smartphone company.
Great. Thank you, Vani. Wonderful story. Our stories are going to be loved. So many are like that. So many are like that when we think differently. And organization, we haven't really talked about it yet, but organization is really created by, it's not created by the land. It doesn't grow. It's created by the mind. It's purely a creation of the mind to rearrange the way we think of things and do them. And that's why its power is unlimited. That's why it's so invaluable. Okay, we're at the end of this. I'd like to take a few minutes to just see if there are questions. I'd love more time than that, and then we'll just conclude, and we'll try to conclude on time with a little talk about assignments for the next 1 week. Any questions or comments that you'd like to have on anything we've discussed? Normally, I'd like to stop more frequently. This has been a long introductory talk. We'll try to have more time for discussion. But anything on your mind, anything you didn't understand or agree with?
Everything was clear. I think so.
Clear.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. How much do we have to pay you for saying that? That was very nice. Thank you. Joking. Okay. Okay. Well, good. Then what I'd like to do, I'd like as an exercise we talked about these three types of organization. I hope it's clear. I'll just repeat. A physical organization is an organization of objects, like a warehouse. A social organization is an organization that people use for their interrelationships. A market is a social organization. Money is a social organization. Language is a social organization. And a mental organization is the way we organize information and ideas and many things, like our idea of a map and so forth. I think you each to make a list of different types of organizations of these three types. So you begin to think organization at whatever you look at. And one of the things you can do is simply look at anything and think of it, is it an organization? Because you'll see there's a principle of organization pretty much in anything that exists, except in when you get something that's living, or certainly something in which human beings are involved. And we want you to know about that, because if it's an organization, it admits of improvement. If it is, it can be organized differently, and in almost every case, it can be organized better. And that's going to tell you something. We're not selling a particular standard way to organize a business. We're telling you whatever business you have and however it's organized, there's a way to organize it better, more creatively, more productively, more efficiently, more expansively. And that's what we want to show you and teach you. And the keys to it, we've said it's very powerful, but we haven't explained where the power comes from yet. What really makes it so powerful? And that's the subject of the second lecture next weekend. So one of the things we would like is feedback from you. And Srijit, you're going to do these slides, I think, right? Or Vani, you're going to do them.
Yes, I can do it.
You're organized, right? Vani.
We would like to get your feedback on this lecture about the clarity of the content, if it suits your interest, if it is relevant to your needs. So feel free to write your comments and suggestions. You can always mail us. And we have seen that some of our mails have been going to the spam folder. So we have sent out the welcome email twice. So if you can save our email ID, homework@unicorn.org, that is our main email address. If you can save that, all our mails to come back to your inbox. And if you can go back to the previous slide, it lists the assignments for this week. Before we come back to the next lecture, please complete your personal survey form and read the Vital Difference, the book Vital Difference, the first chapter on challenge. If you can complete that chapter, it will be really useful for the next lecture. This link, we will mail this to you also.
Where to get the book, how they can get the book without buying it if they don't want to buy it, right?
Yes, we will mail you the link. There is a PDF of the whole book. You can read the book using the link. And we also request you to watch the movie Ocean's 8, the latest movie in the series released in 2018. If you can watch this movie and take notes on the different forms of organization in the movie, it will be helpful for all our discussions in the next lecture. So there are basically two assignments. Read the chapter in the book and watch the movie and take notes.
And I'm going to give you a hint, one hint for the movie, apart from enjoying it if you haven't seen it already. In the opening scene of the movie, there are 5 organizations. At least I saw 5. See how many you can find in the movie, and we'll put them all together. Vani, how are they supposed to communicate? The survey, they have the link for the survey, and we're going to discuss principles from the chapter. And for their feedback on the movie, how are they supposed to?
They're supposed to email their answers to homework@unicorn.org, or if they need any informal, if they want to talk, they can always talk in the WhatsApp group chat. That is like a discussion forum. So if they have any questions, they can always ping up in WhatsApp, or they can send in their homework by email.
So homework is done in Word. So we type it in Word.
Yes, Word document, and you can send it by email.
Okay.
Vani, so the homework is to put together the number of organizations that we see in the movie, put it in the Word file, and send before the lecture, right?
Yes.
What's the deadline?
The next lecture is on 30th, so if you can send by 29.
Okay.
And everybody could join the WhatsApp group, right? Vani? I don't think everybody has.
Yes, not everyone has joined. So if you can join the WhatsApp group, and if you don't receive any emails or if you have any questions, you can always ask us there to get instant replies.
Okay.
Any comments, anything to share from anybody here?
Yes, not only from us, but also among your peers.
Nothing to say at the moment, but I think that on the following lectures we'll have more material to talk about.
Okay.
Vani, I would like to, again, you told these things, but watching Oceanate movie is very, very important because the whole lecture for the next week is purely dependent upon that movie. You know, we'll be quoting examples from there. If you are not watching, it will be very difficult to understand. We will be sitting like Alice in Wonderland, you know. So please watch that movie. It is there in Netflix. 2018 version, Oceanate. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do that.
Can we close for the day, Vani?
Yes, he got disconnected. We can close. I just want to remind that it'd be really helpful for us if you can all send in your feedbacks. And we will share the responses to the survey also. So if you can send in your feedbacks and ask more questions, it'll be easy for us to plan the lectures accordingly. That's it from me.
Yeah. Garry Jacobs had just phoned actually. He has some issues with the internet connection at his place. So he just wanted to pass on this message to everyone. Please make your feedback really frank. What you feel, all that you feel, whatever you wish to communicate to us. So that will be very helpful in designing the subsequent sessions. And we will again meet in a week's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And should we send our feedbacks by email or in the WhatsApp group?
Email is fine.
Okay.
So we need to comment per those items that was given on the slide, right? The feedback.
Yes, on the clarity. Or is it okay if I send in a form? Is it easy for you? If
I think that will, yeah.
A feedback form. If a feedback form is useful, I'll send in a feedback form.
Please,
so
yeah.
That
would be better.
And the chapters will be uploaded on the university portal, or I didn't get quite well.
No,
where do we get
the link will be emailed to you. You would
Okay.
have seen in the
On
people
the slides as well, right?
Yes, we can share the slides also. The course content will also be shared.